What if I told you that behind Levi's stoic demeanor lies a numb and broken individual? Ever since his flashy introduction in Season 1, Levi Ackerman has been one of the easiest characters for viewers to fall in love with in the entirety of Attack on Titan. But this introduction, combined with the way he carries himself, gave many watchers a notion that he would grow to embody traits similar to many characters we see lacking emotional expression in other series. Welcome to Figuring Out Fantasy, where we'll be tackling how Levi Ackerman as a character is far more than what his extravagant fight scenes or passive-aggressive nature leads him on to be, and explaining that through extended canon presented in the No Regrets OVA, we come to understand that he shoulders a burden of loss like few others we come to meet in the show do. If you have some thoughts, be sure to leave them in a comment, and if you want, you could even hit subscribe to make this silly little bar just a bit bigger. Presented to us in a moment where the viewer is still in the dark about a way to truly defeat the Titans, Levi seems like a knight in shining armor. His shining armor in this case being the iconic olive green cape donning the wings of freedom we see in Namor Eren. Not only do we get an epic presentation of Levi through uniquely cinematic finishing blows to each of the Titans he's forced to take care of, but before we get a long stint to his rugged side, we see a glimpse into the soft-hearted nature that resides deep down within him, where he does his damnedest to assure a dying soldier of his that he contributed to the cause of the Scouts. This moment was quick to be forgotten though, as Levi assumed a role which rivaled that of our main protagonist Eren, and it felt like, for a while, the captain had a personal grudge against the Titan shifter, leading to a desire to overcome him as an obstacle as opposed to the usual bonding between the other members of the Survey Corps. This butting of heads comes to, well, a head, in the latter half of the first season after the Scouts travel beyond the walls. Levi challenges our hero and presents a blunt rundown of just how immature and naive Eren is in such a tense situation. But it goes a bit deeper than that, and it's from the captain's perspective. When Levi's squad reassures Eren to place his faith in them in order to escape the female Titan, we see the rest of the Survey Corps headed by Erwin come through and save the fleeing Scouts on horseback, entrapping the threat. But we come to soon realize that when things go off the rails a bit and the Scouts aren't able to rely on the security of the entirety of the Survey Corps, not everybody is capable of surviving. The fate of Levi's squad seems to be an obvious outcome, as the entire time that Levi's trying to convince us that we're acting with too much haste, we can easily understand the gravity of the situation and the reality of the danger that they're in. In the pursuit from the female Titan, we see in shock from Eren's perspective as scout after scout falls victim to the monstrous threat, further emphasizing how they're under some serious pressure. Eren's intuition proves to be accurate as one by one Levi's treasured scout members fall to Annie later on. In this moment, we feel betrayed in a way by Levi, as our impression from him as a captain gives us the notion that he should have had a proper grip on the situation and had been able to make a more rational decision. His reaction doesn't help either when he's given a proper chance to analyze his mistakes and can barely drop his stoic demeanor. Eren knew what his influence as a Titan would be, and in unison with the Scouts could have given them a far better chance to finish things than the plan that was laid out by Erwin did. So why wasn't Levi smart enough to realize this dire situation for what it was? Well, to phrase it like that could be unfair to Levi as a character, since there's widely unacknowledged context towards the ego he carries with him through his time in the Survey Corps. Through watching both parts to the No Regrets special of Attack on Titan, we come to learn that Levi wasn't always the quiet and poker-faced character we're introduced to him as. And an understanding of just what sort of weight he constantly has on his mind gives us a better idea of what his intentions and motivations could be interpreted as in overlapping all of our previous misconceptions. Experiencing his time in the underground of Paradis, operating as a back alley criminal alongside his cherished allies Isabel and Furlan, proved to be an eye-opening encounter with this personality, as Levi portrayed numerous emotions we would rarely see from him throughout the entirety of the show. Not only is Levi a focus to this prequel story, but two infectious characters that don't get much attention from fans also steal the show, and they come to be known as some of the most influential forces as to why Levi assumes the attitude he does. Isabel and Furlan come to be known as individually unique personalities, each with their own complexities that draw comparisons to the centerpiece of Levi. The first of these two we come across seems to resemble many of the admirable traits which Levi possess that places an innate expectations on their capabilities towards holding their own. Furlan Church was a well-experienced thug in the capital's underground district, and over time accumulated members into his gang, further bolstering his position in the gang life of alley living. Levi was a lone warrior in these slums prior to meeting Furlan, almost solely due to his neglect of those who he couldn't acknowledge as able to keep up with him. This new ally is as close as he's gotten to encountering somebody with a similar hatred towards those whose thumb they're constantly under. So he entertains the joint operations and has seemed to recruit a few more members by this point. Not long before the third key piece to this special is introduced. Isabel Magnolia welcomes a change of pace from the typical personalities seen throughout the dark and dangerous streets we had experienced up to this point, and introduces an outspoken and energetic comedic relief to the serious nature displayed by the reality of what it takes to survive down here. This bubbly character was in pursuit of the same goal of reaching the surface as our two sharp criminals, Levi and Furlan, but provides a bit more of a wholesome approach to it. After being chased for sneaking through a checkpoint headed for above ground without paying, Isabel stumbles upon the thug's doorstep and begs to be let in, as it seems to be her only chance to get away. Levi quickly disperses of these pursuers and comes to find out that this kid was carrying a bird who she wished to return to the surface. Introducing such a selfless objective combined with a new positive spin on the situation they're in, Isabel is an instant hit from nearly the very start. These three characters come to join together in a sort of trifecta similar to the composition of our well-known trio in Eren, Armin, and Mikasa. But with Levi assuming a similar role to Eren as the protagonist in this stint, it allows us to peer much deeper into the thought process and relationships of a character that we already thought we knew so well. The gang finds themselves involved with the scouts that reside above them, but not in the typical manner that we're used to. Employed by Nicholas Lovoff, the three are instructed to infiltrate the Scouts regime and ultimately assassinate our beloved Captain Erwin Smith. And through this venture, Levi comes to truly understand what degree of strength is required to survive in the brutal world they live in. Being kept under the capital for so long, the members of that society got used to their specific level of danger they were forced to endure. Robberies, vandalization, and being jumped was the most of the dangers that the members of the underground needed to prepare to engage with. It was a very survival of the fittest mentality in these streets, and those like Levi, Furlan, and Isabel were examples of how quick wits and agile mechanics were enough to get them on their way to the top of the chain. But this was different in what they would experience above their false sky. Right out of the gate, the gang's transition into the Survey Corps seems to be as natural as it gets, especially for Levi. Exemplifying pure skill in his display of Titan killing practice, he gains immediate respect of notorious scouts like Hanji, one who we know is capable of looking deeper than the surface level, stating that scouts like Levi are the best examples of how diversifying your approach is the most effective tactic in slaying these monsters. The infectious Isabel also proves her capabilities in maneuvering on horseback, even given the fact that she's never interacted with a horse prior, but has an innate ability to communicate with animals, derived from her interaction with the bird we saw her with earlier. All of these positives were going for the group, and yet Levi hesitates to place full trust in his two comrades, requesting that both of them find ways to stay behind and allow him to go alone in the expedition beyond the walls. Through a lighthearted conversation, though, Isabel and Furlan are able to convince Levi that he can trust in them, explaining how through their bonds as friends and cherished allies, they can be a force multiplier when working together. Levi cracks and has a change of heart towards the idea, and even shows a bit of optimism through his facial expressions, something we don't typically get to see from the character, possibly showing a true sense of being at peace. This notion is further emphasized by their first impressions of the world beyond the walls, and how much of a polar opposite it is compared to the gloomy environment that they'd grown accustomed to under the capital. Isabel feels one with the nature she was dreaming so passionately about interacting with in her time in the underground, and even Levi was too amazed to hold his feelings towards these landscapes within. Our confidence in the capabilities of this group are solidified more and more as the expedition goes on, especially after they slay two titans between the three of them, even if Levi was noted as using too much of his gas with unnecessary movements by Erwin. The titans, though, are never-ending forces, and even though the scouts are able to surmount these odds time and time again, there is never a sense of being at ease due to the sheer threat always looming of them taking advantage of some complacency. And that's exactly what happened. As some rain hits the battlefield, Levi deems this an opportune time to pursue Captain Erwin. Visibility continues to become poorer and poorer until the point where Levi can barely see the devastation left from an abnormal titan until he's nearly right on top of it. And not only this, Levi missed the fact that he had traveled right past the monster without even noticing a thing due to the low visibility constantly at play. And in this moment, he realized why he hesitated in the first place, and why he couldn't place full trust in those he loved and allowed them to enter the same dangers he was so confident that he could survive in himself. Desperately chasing back to the last spot he remembers leaving Isabel and Furlan, Levi's horse trips over one of the many obstacles in the form of dead bodies, and throws Levi to the ground, only for his first sight when collecting himself to be this. All of Levi's suspicions about what awaited them beyond the walls were confirmed, further bolstering the idea in his head that he can never latch on to the idea of attachment and placing emotional weight in those around him he doesn't deem capable of keeping up with him, because of a fear in ever losing somebody he felt responsibility to protect. If somebody was able to carry their weight in the same dangerous scenarios Levi was so confident in, then he wouldn't have to carry a burden of possibly being able to save them if they were to meet an unfortunate fate, as they were strong enough to protect themselves in the first place. Even though Isabel and Furlan were so capable in the underground and seemed to be proficient in the scouts' training, he didn't feel as if he would be able to go outside the walls with them and not feel a sense to protect them. And when he's misled by the two into thinking that they can hold their own in such a brutal environment, the weight is lifted off of his shoulders as they enact the expedition, and he even feels confident enough to pursue Irwin after the rain commences. But after everything is said and done, Levi only got more confirmation that he should have never allowed them to convince him to let them insert themselves into such a dangerous situation. This all ties back to the Levi we see in the main series, especially the scene mentioned earlier where he's passing by the devastation left by Annie on his squad, and how he maintains such a poker face through it all. He isn't blind to the feeling, he has just placed things into a perspective in a way where he's able to cope with the loss of so many allies. To never become truly attached to any specific members of the Scouts for Levi is to never have something to lose in the first place. And for Levi to feel the loss of something, as we see, is a case he never wants to experience again. If you made it till the end, thanks for watching. Like I said, if you have some thoughts, make sure to comment them below. I read and reply to as many comments as I can, as it's one of the most enjoyable parts about making videos.